This is the London Fintech Podcast, bringing you practical insights and approaches, stories and inspiration from the innovators who are building the new world of financial services. Welcome to London Fintech Podcast. We've put this episode together with our presenting partner and friend of the show, Pleo. Pleo is a modern CFO system providing a single platform for businesses across pay, manage and optimize. So think employee expenses and corporate expenditure, multi-currency tracking, treasury management on one system in real time. So we are in the finance and treasury space today. And what are we going to be talking about? Well, Pleo have recently published 3 key reports focusing on modernising the office of the CFO, treasury and decision-making. And it's the decision-making challenge that we're going to focus on by asking and hopefully answering the question, have businesses forgotten how to make decisions? Pleo surveyed 2,600 finance professionals to understand the power of confident decision-making. So we'll draw some findings from that report and we'll link it in the show notes. We're talking about corporate strategy, investment and spending decisions principally, what is required to make a good decision, an informed decision, and how firms set up to support effective decision-making. The research suggests that there are more than 2 trillion business decisions made in Europe every day, but having more decisions to make doesn't necessarily mean businesses have become better at it. My guest today is Susanne Chishti. She has a perspective from across the fintech spectrum, both from big banks and startups alike. Suzanne is the award-winning founder and chair of Fintech Circle, a FTSE board member, investor and author. So, welcome, Suzanne. It's great to get the opportunity to talk to you.
Great. Thanks very much, Tony, for having me.
Tell me a bit more about your background. I touched on a few things there, and that's a diverse set of experiences really from all across fintech. And I'd love to know a little bit about your perspective on the sector.
Of course, no, I'm an ex-banker, so I worked for lots of banks, for Morgan Stanley, asset management, to Lloyds Bank, to Deutsche. So background in banking, actually consulting. So I worked for Accenture, implementing software solutions for banks. And then 10 years ago, I launched Fintech Circle, and we are an investor network where we invest our own capital into great fintech startups and help to scale them. And I'm also an advisory board member of a corporate venture capital fund in Austria by Raiffeisen Bank International, which is called Elevator Ventures. And I'm also a board member of a UK bank here in the UK called Crown Agents Bank. So I really look at the topic of expenses, finance, of the tasks, what a CFO is supposed to do from all sizes of businesses, no matter if it's a startup, a scale-up or a listed company. And it's really interested to do that because you see the whole spectrum, of decisions and that they're becoming more complex, as you said, in the world today.
And am I right? You're Austrian, but based in London?
I am, exactly. I'm originally from Vienna. I moved to London 26 years ago and based in West London now.
Very much a local. And Fintech Circle, that's a big community, if I'm right, a sort of 250,000 fintech entrepreneurs, investors, financial services folks.
Exactly. So I remember when we started out, we were less small, but now we reach 250,000 fintech entrepreneurs, fintech investors, and lots of finance and technology professionals across the UK and across Europe.
How many investments has the community backed then?
We are 70 investors. We meet in London about 3-4 times a year. And our goal always is to find the best fintech startups, and they can apply to us online. Then we've got selection days, so we choose the best CEOs, and then we coach them as well how to present to investors so that the investor network runs really smoothly. And I would say over the last, I would say probably maybe 15, 18 investments, I personally made. And then, of course, my other 70 investors invest. Sometimes we co-invest in the same opportunities. Other times, you focus always, I guess, on the areas you can add most value to. And that's what we call smart capital.
Yeah. So a great vantage point for seeing what's going on in the sector. And actually, I noticed from your introduction there, it's surprising how many people you run across who started out at Accenture, which includes me as well. So we have something in common.
Excellent.
Okay. So we're there. Look, I'm really looking forward to getting your perspective on sort of decision-making in the office of the CFO, if you will. And I think that's really where Pleo focused on their research, and there were some really interesting findings there. So let's talk about it and perhaps start with some of the challenges that finance professionals are facing. So I think the headline stat was that 68% of UK leaders admitted that they could have made more informed and smarter choices. And I think there were some really interesting findings about things like manual processes and manual overload. But I'll throw it over to you. What are the big challenges, the big obstacles that finance professionals are facing in today's market?
Yeah, I think these are, great statistics which Pleo has uncovered in the research. And I think it's as a result of our complex environment, in which we are working and living in, with geopolitical risks have increased substantially. We've seen investment landscapes getting tougher over the last 5 years. And so any CFO, no matter if you're part of a smaller or a larger company, needs to make often very difficult decisions and fast decisions. And that's and in a world where often you don't have access to all the data, because when you learn, finance in business schools and university, you always assume you've got access to all the data you need in order to make the perfect and the correct decision. But most companies don't live in this ideal world, where they've got access to the data they would need. So there's lots of gut feeling, guessing, taking place, because if you don't have access to this decision, to the data which is required to make great decisions, you are stuck. And I think the report on decision making showed that so many CFOs feel they are uncertain about the decisions they have to make because they don't have access to enough data. And that's, of course, what a solution such as Pleo can help, in terms of really having visibility on all your expenditure, and all your spending in one place. And that's, I think, what lots of people in finance, treasury management need, but not everybody has got that yet. And so it leads to either, delayed decision making. It leads to sometimes probably wrong decision making. And often worse, it leads to no decision making at all, Tony, and that's an issue, because if you don't make a decision, you're just delaying things for later. This might put you into a worse financial position long term.
Yeah, I think the analysts called that decision freeze, and they found that over 50%, I think it's 55% of UK decision makers would say they've had decision freeze. It's something I'm quite familiar with, because I think you drew a really interesting distinction there between the sort of business school environment where it's a slightly academic problem solved based on being provided the right set of information, versus the real world where you just don't have the right set of information. And actually in the consulting space, when we do advisory strategy projects, we often find that 80% of the project timeline is simply gathering the data and the information, as is the same in the line functions. And you don't have enough time then to take a considered view on the strategy and make some sensible decisions. It's a real problem.
That's so true, Tony. And, and there's so many companies who have got multiple entities, where the headquarters in the UK, then you've got the subsidiaries in Germany or in France and in the Netherlands. And once you've got multi-entity companies, which are normally the scale-ups, the ones who want to become European leaders, you've got cash in all of those entities stored. And if you're the UK and the group CEO, in the UK, you need to have access to the data, to what your teams are spending money on across countries, in order to get a complete picture, where your company stands every month. And again, that's hard if you don't have a solution which gives you this multi-entity approach and aggregate data transparency. So that's, these are really challenges which companies face day to day. And I know one technology company here in London, who's got these multi-entities, and they are waiting often for research and development tax grants to come back. And once those are delayed, for example, you need to think in scenarios. But how can you think in scenarios if you cannot quantify what these various options mean? So data really is key, I think, here, and really access to real-time data that empowers any CFO to make decisions faster and help to be a better partner to the CEO ultimately, who runs the business overall.
Yeah, I think the ambition for CFOs and finance functions as a whole should be and needs to be, in the current environment, looking forward rather than looking in the rearview mirror, measuring everything that may have happened days or weeks earlier. But unfortunately, there's a lot of fragmentation, a lot of manual process, and by the time you get the data, it's often out of date. I think that the researchers found that, and this is a staggering stat actually, over 26 hours a week on manual treasury tasks. So that's more than half your week on manual processes and data collation.
Yes.
And it's across multiple systems as well.
Exactly. And I think probably, Tony, we both know it from our own experience, having worked, for Accenture, as you said at the beginning. Anytime an employee of a large company has an expense claim, it is so much admin for the employee as well, just to get the taxi receipt, to upload it. What in our case, we had to manually copy it and scan it and email it, to somebody in the finance team. And again, the good thing is, what I like about Pleo is that it helps both the employees to make it less burdensome for the employees, but of course better for the finance team to get access to all the information in one go. So it really, I remember, we spent delays when you have to set up and submit an expense claim and you just don't get all your invoices ready and you just don't want to spend so much time on scanning it all in. It's a waste of our time as employees, and equally it's a waste of the finance team who would normally have to do so much manual work, which is not really value added and really old fashioned and luckily shouldn't be needed to do this anymore nowadays.
Yeah. Well, I'll be dating myself by saying this, but when I started out, it was, I'm not sure we were even scanning the receipts, but we were placing them on large sheets of A4 and I had to go and get a long arm lever stapler so that we could staple things to these bits of paper and you'd have a little stack of papers and you'd hand them in to get your expenses paid. And thankfully things have moved on a bit since then. And I see this in our business as well. And we've got expense systems and ledgers and project systems and time recording and so forth. And when you're hopping between platforms and reconciling between platforms, it just creates a lot of work.
Yes, 100%. And I think, when I think about company CFOs of larger banks, as soon as you're a listed company, for example, and you're the CFO, you made promises to the market. You gave often expected, earnings, expected profitability forecasts for the end of the year. And so you need to be able to check, every month, every quarter, are you on track to achieve those targets which you have set in public? And if you realize that you're off target, or let's say 3 months before year end, you need to be able to change route. And the only thing you can do at that time is to cut costs quickly because you can't increase revenue so fast. So you have to have a good overview on your expenses and to see where can you cut, where can you delay, where can you maybe limit, spending in certain teams, in certain regions. So, in order to ensure that overall you stay in the budget. And that's really important, I think, for really listed boards, equally for private boards, because you want to ensure that as CFO, you hit your numbers because you're rewarded for that. And in order to do that, you need to have the right tools in place.
Yeah, particularly in this, as you said, when we started talking in this current challenging macroeconomic environment where margins are thin and business is challenging and the effective decision making, the right decisions couldn't be more important. Before we jump right into today's episode, a quick thank you to our sponsor, NextWave. NextWave is an award-winning consultancy that is helping many of the world's leading banks, investment managers, and insurers deliver on their growth, efficiency, risk, and control goals and transform their businesses. With a senior team who have come from MD-level positions in major firms like HSBC, Barclays, and UBS, NextWave has both the deep industry expertise and the hands-on capabilities in AI, data, and automation to drive real results. More business outcomes and less PowerPoint from the consulting experience, as their clients like to say. NextWave has moved 2-week manual processes to 5-minute agentic automations, rescued global banking regulatory control programs, and digitized deal platforms, sustainability, and regulatory reporting systems. And they do much of this with hands-on engineering capabilities on leading technologies, which include ServiceNow, Alteryx, Quantexa, and Camunda. So if a modern and specialist alternative to the big brand consulting model sounds appealing, one which covers the full life cycle of strategy specialists and solutions, but with small practitioner teams, rapid delivery, and a better price point, then perhaps you should talk to NextWave. Visit nxwave.com to find out more and get in touch. That's nxwave.com. All right, let's get back to the episode. So let's unpack so we talked about the problems, right? So we've got this fragmented manual treasury finance functions, lots of different systems, lots of spreadsheets. And this isn't true of all firms, but it's true of very many firms. And ambition to modernize, to digitize, to bring things onto a single platform so that the data is at your fingertips to make real-time decisions. So let's just unpack that ambition a bit. What are the sort of things that we think finance professionals need? I mean, we're talking about decision making in the context of Office of the Finance. So it's not necessarily everything that would be on the board agenda, on the CEO agenda. It's more thinking cash, treasury, investment decisions. Where are we going to spend? It's the financial dimension of the firm's priorities. But to do that, what do we need in terms of tools and platforms?
Yeah. I think if you assume, a mid-size startup, maybe 30 people, and who have got teams, sales teams going and going to events, going to conferences, spending on travel, on hotels, on flights, on taxis. Then you've got lots of subscriptions, for technology solutions for your potentially memberships to various organizations. And as each team, each sales team would have their own goals, their own budgets, what they are able to spend it on. And then it gets added up, in each country to make sure that the country is in the budget overall across European teams, for example. And so what you need to have is really a solution which allows you to collect the data easily, real time, and then summarize it in a way which is easy to understand. But I think we all have seen spreadsheets, Tony, which have been manually done in the past, which were so complicated that you probably needed to have a PhD to understand what the solutions or the takeaways were from those spreadsheets. And as soon as you wanted to change things, you needed another member of the team to change the assumptions of the macros, which were behind the Excels. And that's luckily, with the Pleo solution, you don't have this at all. It's a very simple and very easy user interface, great to navigate, even if you're not a techie at all. And so it helps both to really integrate your expense management to, let's say, if you use Xero or use QuickBooks or you use any other accountancy software, you can integrate all your expenses automatically into your accountancy platform and have it all in one place. And have it visible from different angles. You can have it visible from the finance function if they want to really see how much has been spent overall in the company. But you also can have it visible from the people who have to authorize expenses. As you know, in a big company, it's often complicated. You've got one team, but then the boss has to sign off that this expense is actually valid. And those sign-offs, are often, remember in my past careers, they were done by email. So it was horrendous in terms of, workflow. But now it can be done easily in the solution, in the app. You've got it all. You can sign-offs are done, recorded, time-stamped. And so everything is auditable. That's also very important. So you know who signed off what. You can verify things have been in the budget, have been within the limit of what's acceptable. And you can take decisions if you've overspent, let's say in the first half of the year, and not achieved the revenue targets you wanted. You can say, okay, now we have to spend less because we have to ensure that we are in budget for the investors we have on our cap table. And lots of startups, we shouldn't forget, and lots of scale-ups, ultimately they've got investors at board level and in the board meetings who check the burn rate for every month. Are you on track with your burn rate? And ideally you want to stretch your burn rate so that you're not in a desperate position to raise a new funding round, if maybe you don't have access to capital immediately when you need it. So you need to be flexible and you need to be agile. And that's in order to do that, you have to have the right tools in place.
Yeah. So in that continuum that we talked about, pay, manage, and optimize, it starts with pay. So it's what are we spending? And on a modern platform, you can, and I think this is a really great innovation that goes way beyond, again, the old way, which is we all pay for things on our own credit cards and put those paper receipts in it and wait a couple of weeks or the end of the month to get paid back. These are preset budgets on digital credit cards that are issued to the staff, and it's not just employee expenses; it's corporate expense. So you can put the travel and the office through it as well, and so that's really giving you real time visibility of everything that's being spent and by who and on what. So that's sort of payment on platform. And then what's interesting about this space for me is, well, wouldn't it be great if you could do that, but then you could also manage the budgets that everyone's been given and the pre-approvals and bring it all together in one set of analytics, so you can see where the money's going and when. And then if you had all of that, then surely you could manage your currency balances across different bank accounts, do some forward-looking analytics on what's going to be spent, and then we're back to the headline topic, make some really good decisions about the burn rate that you mentioned versus budget and what's coming up and cash forecast and so forth. So just sort of kind of characterizing the life cycle for me, this is how this whole space sort of hangs together.
Yes, I totally agree with you. And like the last point you said, if you then have got these various currency accounts across different subsidiaries, and let's assume you are a UK CFO, running these local subsidiaries, you have to decide, does it make sense to move the money, let's say, from your French entity into the UK entity and then invest it here in the UK, maximize your return, your yield in a short-term liquidity tool, for example. Or is it better to keep the money in France and invest it there locally? So what is the trade-off? What are the costs of FX transfers versus what are the extra yields you could get if you move money into a certain country based on different interest rates you could get in each currency region? And those decisions are really difficult ones to make, requiring lots of different data points. And but it's if you don't make them, if you have not information at all, you just leave everything the way it is, you're missing out. You're leaving cash not working for you, which from a treasury function is a shame, because you want to maximize the yield on the cash you've got. And so that's really important to have, yes, right, access to those data points and having all your currency accounts in one place as well, to be able to see where money is stuck, potentially, and where money can be optimized to make it work for you overnight. Or if you're able to put it aside for a longer period of time, how can you put into more midterm money market products, for example? Or how can you invest? Some companies who've got enough liquidity, they of course might want to acquire another company or invest in a joint venture operation. And so it allows you to know your options, your strategic options ultimately.
Yeah. So again, on the cash management side, if you can identify where you've got idle cash or you think you are going to have cash that could be put to better work, then and the mechanism to link your bank accounts in and to move money around and so forth and put it where it can earn a return, then you can really undertake that true treasury function, optimizing capital.
Yes.
And wouldn't it be great if you could do that in the same platform that you can also see all the expenses and see the overall analytics on the finances of the firm? And I think that's really what we're talking about here. So you touched on Pleo a couple of times, and obviously we're doing this episode with support from Pleo. So I think it's good to talk about the Pleo platform a little bit. But what's the Pleo approach to cash management in this sort of connected ecosystem that we're all living in now?
And I, as Austrian, living in London, heard about Pleo for the first time. It was I think it was 21 when Pleo had its funding round in Copenhagen and became the first unicorn worth, €1 billion at that time as the first unicorn in Europe, and the leader in spend management, which I thought was very exciting. And I think it comes out from a need, which had been underserved by all other players in the past. And what I liked as well very much, about the company is that they came from Copenhagen, but then expanded across Europe, because it is interesting, but it's very logical that all companies have got the same issues, because cash management, expense management is the same problem, no matter in which country you live in. And you've got the same, challenges as CFO, as employee of companies, with your expenses. So it is very uniform. One one hand, so everybody acknowledges, those are the same issues we face, and therefore we all need solutions which work across Europe. I think that's what Pleo has achieved, to really develop a solution which works across Europe, and it works also across the States, obviously, with US dollar accounts, and helps to move one area, which is expense management, into an area which really becomes added value for the company overall, instead of just being a cost center in the past.
Yeah, and who do you see Pleo lining up against in the market? Because it's an interesting space. So expense management in one hand, and then treasury stroke cash management, but there's also payments providers as well. So for Amex, we'll say we'll give you corporate cards for the employees, for example. But it doesn't come with the analytics bit and the cash management bit. At least the version I've seen doesn't have those bits as well. But I guess I just wanted to get a handle on where Pleo see themselves lining up against other providers in the market, and perhaps where you see the business going, because there's an overlap with some of these larger players and a lot of firms in the space.
Yes. I would say, when I put my investor hat on,
Yes.
and from an investor point of view, what I like about the business model of Pleo is that it's both serves, the SMEs, and there are basically 40,000 customers, I think in 16 markets, overall, who buy their solutions. But equally, it's a B2B2C proposition, which we call embedded finance. So if you are a bank and you want to provide these expense management solutions to your own customers, you can white label the Pleo platform under your bank's name and offer this to your own SME client base. And so you have, as a business overall, you've got two very different revenue streams. One is direct customers, one is your indirect route to market via partnerships. And these partners, of course, are large companies and large institutions. And so I think the management of Pleo and the CFO of Pleo and the CEO of Pleo, have developed a very a great business, and that's why I think they are, growing as a unicorn, in order to ensure that this problem is being solved. And you can, of course, reach more people if you not just rely on your own distribution channels, but you work with partners, globally. And so I think that's a powerful way of doing it, and sets Pleo apart from others who are just in one corner of the sector, but don't offer holistic solutions, to customers.
40,000 customers that's a big client base. And what's the sort of profile of those firms? And you said that you gave an example of sort of 30 employees, but are we talking the SME mid-market size clients, or are there some really big ones as well?
I think the solution, I know so many fintech companies who could implement Pleo immediately. The companies literally from 10, 20 employees onwards. But equally, if you are a regulated institution, say a regulated bank with 400, 500 employees, it would also be perfect for you. Or you might be a larger, let's say, accountancy practice, HR solution provider. All these, I would say, so that's a size, between, 10 to 500 employees.
Yeah. And do you think that finance functions out there in the sector are self-aware enough of the 26 hours a week that they're doing on manual processes and the multiple systems, really feeling the inefficiency of current processes? And I'm just wanting to sort of dig into the reasons that they might be looking for an integrated platform for expense management, cash, treasury altogether. Do they turn up and say, I'd like one of those? Or do they more turn up and say, I like the idea of giving my employees expense cards and managing it centrally, and then go, I can do this as well. Do you
Yes.
think the sector knows what the opportunity is to really bring those platforms together?
I think, when I look at the CEOs I know, many of them are just very frustrated. They're frustrated by not being able to make decisions quickly enough. They're stressed out because there's so much going on. Ideally, they would like to think in various scenarios in parallel, but often they find that if they ask the CFO or the finance manager, they're just getting one response, one scenario being calculated, often in Excel still. And then they have to go back and say, can you make adjustments, which takes another 3-4 days. Then you're already next week. So you're losing weeks when you have to think about options and optionality. So that's what I think is the issue. That people are stressed, often anxious, and just don't know why it is so difficult to run a business. And I think not everybody knows that those solutions exist. So I think
Yes.
that's definitely the case that, I think the more people realize that, cash management solutions exist and expense management solutions exist to help them reduce those sleepless nights, they would use them immediately. But I think often it's an awareness issue. And then maybe the other issue is that they think it's too complicated to implement. It might take weeks to implement something new. So it's, I think, lack of knowledge sometimes, and sometimes fear of changing the way business is being done or decisions are being made, because they are afraid that an integration would be too difficult or it would not integrate with the existing accountancy platforms, which, as we know, is not the case with Pleo.
Yeah. Well, hopefully this conversation will help them with awareness and understanding that single solutions or more powerful solutions are out there in the market. And I recognize what you were saying about, stress, anxiety, when you're facing into perhaps investor demands or incomplete view of the business figures and performance, that can be extremely stressful. I think finance folks oftentimes will be just focused on, let me get the full set of numbers by any means necessary, and probably losing sleep over it in the process, rather than being able to carve out time to think about, oh, is there a better way to do this? So just sort of lifting your head and realizing that you can actually put the expense processing together with the cash and the treasury, and get the real time analytics that will take the pressure off, I think is a moment of realization. And then you were explaining sort of how easy it is to get on board with a platform like this. So for anyone out there in finance land who's wondering sort of what does a modern finance function, at least in the cash and treasury space, perhaps look like, there's some pretty neat tools here. Talk to me a little bit about Pleo's single platform strategy then, because the other way you might address this is to say, oh, there are some amazing digital ledger products out there. There's a great expense tracker, and we all live in this API ecosystem. So I'll just go and knit them together and I'll get the best in class from each. And I think, again, I'm looking at sort of Pleo's strategy, and that they've taken the other end of that spectrum and said, well, really, you want this all in one unified interface. And I'm interested on the thought process there.
Yes. No, it was interesting, when I read the report, the decision-making report, normally the fact or the tool they use to connect all those tools, often Excel spreadsheets. So it is incredibly burdensome, very slow, and very open to errors, because Excels can be wrongly programmed, as it can be wrongly read, can be wrongly interpreted. So I think that's one of the issues why probably CFOs and CEOs have got, unnecessary stress, because if you have got so much data and so much important data in different tools, which all don't talk to each other, you're wasting so much time just to coordinate things internally and just to connect different systems. And that's completely unnecessary, because it doesn't add value. It doesn't increase your revenues, doesn't reduce your costs. It doesn't make you more compliant or more attractive to your customers at all. So it's an unnecessary admin burden. And so Pleo's focus on having everything in one place, having one single solution, which is being used to upload, your expenses, to control and sign off expenses, to also show what are your policies, so at what stage are you allowed to take a taxi, for example, how much can a taxi receipt be, to kind of include your expense policy in an automated way for your employees, to make it really easy and transparent, that employees know what is okay to do and what's out of scope. Then internally, the process of reviews, of sign-offs, of aggregation of data per team, per country, And if this all would be in different systems and old-fashioned, ways were that we had different systems per country, it would take an incredibly amount of time and you would lose the value-added information by having it in one place because you can compare and contrast. And if you see, for example, that one team spent much less but has achieved much more with what they spent, then you think, what can we learn from this one team? Do they have better leadership? Do they have better ways of getting things done? Are they more agile? Are they just more well-trained? But you can see and compare teams inside the organization, almost help management then to understand, is there something where we need to invest more in training, training our employees, or can we inspire them, to do things differently? So it helps you to create a certain consistency in a global European organization, and consistency of processes gives management overall lots of stability to know that the right things are being done. And then you can really focus on what matters to your customer. Because ultimately, no matter which company you are, your customer doesn't care about your expenses. It's an internal issue. And you want to be able to serve your customers well. But in order to do that, you have to get rid of any headaches, with any internal admin, which you have spent too much time on in the past. So it really allows you to focus on your forward-looking, revenues and new business opportunities and new sales opportunities, because you can rely on that your expenses are dealt with correctly, safely, and professionally.
Yeah.
And so that's definitely gives you lots of peace of mind and probably extra time to focus on revenue uplifting activities.
Yeah. So I recognize the time, the admin burden, the data delays of fragmentation. Did the analysts also look at the cost of having all those different tools? Single unified tool versus different platforms, all of which you're probably paying a fractional subscription on.
You're totally right, Tony. So I think it's just in terms of cost saving, it makes sense to replace, those tools with one solution. And being an ex-techie, who coded Accenture. So I can only say any new company or any other, technology company who wants to try to include, Pleo as an expense management tool. It is very simple to do. And once you go live and see the benefits, you can then see that what other systems you can switch off, and that's of course great because you save money immediately and you can switch off anything else which you don't need anymore. And without losing any functionality. In fact, you get probably better functionality and you're just saving costs.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. So often, businesses are asking for better systems. I want a new system, but actually CIOs and business leaders, at least the progressive ones, are really celebrating when they switch things off. So it's actually decluttering things and getting single unified end-to-end flows, which is really going to drive efficiency into the business.
Yes, 100%. It's decluttering, making more simple, more straightforward, and allowing you to focus on what matters. I think that's a key thing because in our complex world, it is difficult to prioritize, to see what really matters most, because we can't do everything. We can't focus on everything. And what matters most, you really double down on those areas. You need the right tools to support you as a management team. Then you can be more effective and you can achieve more.
We've talked a lot about end-to-end cash expenses, treasury, decision making. One of the newer things I know the company's focused on is the embedded finance solution, which I find very interesting. We've had embedded investing on this show. I was at a conference this week where they were talking about embedded insurance, the sort of embedded everything. But the embedded finance solution, but where did that come from? Because that's presumably not the same problem statement you were getting from the Office of Finance. It's sort of a new proposition and client segment. But what was driving behind bringing that product to market?
Yeah. I think the trend, when I look at the fintech developments over the last decades, embedded finance became a term probably the last 5 years, where people realized we want to put the power of financial products into other companies' hands who are not necessarily experts in finance, but we want them to also be able to leverage financial tools. And that's what the embedded finance solution of Pleo is all about. It's about empowering partners to use their solutions, which Pleo has built, over the last 10 years, but rolling it out to their customer base of small and middle-sized enterprises in order to leverage their potentially millions of clients. So when you think about a bank, and a neobank, for example, you would have millions of customers using your business banking services, but they don't have expense management solutions because they're a regulated bank. And so what can you do to add more revenues as a bank? By adding services which your customers need. And so that's a way where any new bank, for example, focused on business banking could work with Pleo to integrate Pleo's services into their offering under their brand name. And so it makes perfect sense because if it's any company dealing with SMEs, who is able to provide this extra service can integrate it under their branding and white label, the Pleo experience to their own customers. So that's what embedded finance is all about. And it really allows you to go to route to market much faster because it wouldn't make sense for any other company to reinvent what Pleo has done and what it took 10 years to develop. But you can license it, and go to market faster via this embedded finance opportunity.
Yeah, it's a great win-win because to your point, why would you rebuild that ground up when there's 10 years of great functionality out there? It's a little bit like Ocado licensing their digital warehouse and delivery tech and not just being known for delivering from one grocery. And you're seeing it in every sector. So exciting addition, I guess, to the proposition. And from Pleo perspective, that's access to a much wider client base, right? A whole new addressable market through partnering up
Exactly.
with those big firms.
And it's when I think about ideal partners for that would be, of course, any banks, but it also would be any accountancy firms. There's so many great accountancy companies across the UK. We've got all these SME customers dealing and getting tax advice, getting financial advice, getting regulatory guidance. All of them could implement Pleo as an additional service to their customers. And so then their customers benefit of getting everything in one hand, getting the more information, the more services, the better. But equally, they don't have to reinvent the wheel, but just take the ready-made working solution, but white labeling it for their own customer base. Yeah.
Thank you. So look, we won't have time today to talk so much about the Pleo journey, but this is a sort of mini series in that I'm going to do a second episode with Pleo leadership and talk a bit more about growing a growth fintech. So we'll save that one for the audience who want to know more about how do you build one of these fintechs doing best in class expense and cash management and embedded finance and the journey that Pleo have been on. So we'll save that for another conversation, but more for the finance and CFO audience, perhaps your sort of three takeaways. We're talking about how to make effective decisions, but in the context of Office of the Finance, so financial decisions. What would be your three takeaways and recommendations, perhaps for the audience?
Yeah, I would say the first takeaway as a CFO of any company is I think you are more important than ever. So that's what I would say. To any CFO, that you in your role, you're more important than ever to support your CEO to really make the right decisions at the right time. So that's number one. Number two, it's use the tools which are available. Don't try to do things manually anymore. Just use the latest tools which make your life easier and allow you to make better decisions. And number three, I would say, think about what tools and which tools are out there which allow you to grow with your business. You need things which are scaling with you and which don't, where the limitations are not that the software, the solution you have stops at a certain size of your business, but something which can join you on your journey. So if you're a single entity company, for example, in the UK, you've got one legal entity here, limited company, but you want to grow and grow globally. So you need a solution which is multi-entity enabled. So think with that in mind that as a CFO, that you want something which helps you on your journey long term as well.
So think big, architect for scale, use the tools that are out there and get on the front foot if you're not already, so that you're leading the business rather than just reporting on it. And okay, those are great top tips. And I missed a question actually when we started because I generally ask people on the show what they do when they're not working, and we've had some fun answers. So I'm going to just throw that one in at the end of the conversation. I could guess, given that you're Austrian, but I'll let you answer. What do you do to sort of decompress when you're not working in the fintech space?
Yes, I do love skiing, as you would expect from Austrians.
Yes. Was that or bobsleigh? So I wasn't quite sure.
Yes, I think we all learned skiing when we hardly could walk, probably from kindergarten onwards and then school trips. So that's definitely one way of decompressing at the height of the mountains with lovely après ski as well.
Yeah, well, we're recording this as we're sort of just about rolling into winter. So I guess the ski season's right ahead.
Yes, exactly. So look forward to that. Definitely, Tony.
Yeah. Thanks, Suzanne. And again, and we'll put this in the notes depending what the answer is. But anything interesting that you're reading or listening to currently? I find that all my guests are always studying something or have picked up on something interesting, and we like to share that with the audience.
Yeah. I read one book which I can recommend anybody, which is called From Good to Great by Jim Collins. And it's a fantastic book. It basically says that the majority of companies are good, but they're not great. And so how do you go from a good average sized company to a super one? And what do you need to do to get there? And that really resonates with me, what I can see. And so that's a super book. I can really recommend it. Very readable with great case studies. And it almost verifies lots of things we discussed today as well in terms of getting access to the right data, looking at the data into the eyes, but then making brave decisions, with more visibility and more transparency.
Yeah, so getting from good to great. Okay, we'll link that one. And where to find out more or reach you if folks want to get in touch? Because you're not, as I said at the top of the show, you're not actually attached directly to Pleo and you're across all sorts of things. So where should folks look if they want to find out more about Suzanne?
Yes, the best thing is to reach out on LinkedIn, under my name, or to come to our website at fintechcircle.com. But those are the best ways to get in touch.
Yeah, FinTech Circle. And we talked about that a little bit in the intro. So thanks so much, Suzanne. Really great to talk to you. Some really strong perspectives there for everyone in the finance space. And I hope everyone got a few golden nuggets from that conversation. And we'll call it time there. But thanks so much.
Thanks very much, Tony.